the podcast where the real world meets the digital world as we explore the intersection of spatial computing and AI. Let's welcome our host, Andrew Ballard. Over to you, AB.
Well, g'day and welcome to Spatial. This is episode 7 coming to you from late February 2024. We've got a quorum, half a quorum, 60% of a quorum. It's hard to say myself, and I'm staring at Violet and William on Discord. Sadly, we are missing. Mirek is sadly bowing to his robot overlords, hopefully keeping them in check. That's the battle plan anyway. And Helena, after a birthday week last week, has some sick kids, so I feel your pain. My memories of the repressed memories of that era have been buried deep, and I absolutely understand. So we hope to get them both back in town next week. All good. Some great news too. We're starting to tee up special guests. So for the record, we'll be doing Spatial as a weekly episode coming at about this regular time. But we're going to intersperse those with shorter, sharper, more focused interviews with guests from industry, from research, from all parts of the spatial AI world. And we're going to intersperse those wherever they fall. So during the weeks, those will be coming to you shortly. We've got a long list of people we are hoping to talk to, wanting to talk to, talking to, and we'll get through those lists as we go through the weeks. Should be great. But William and Violet, wow. Just before last week's episode, when we were talking about robots, just half hour before we went to air, quote unquote, OpenAI dropped one of its bombshells. It dropped Sora, the text-to-video that literally floored most of the internet over the last 7 days. Your thoughts about, the pre-release? They're currently red teaming it, which is a polite way of saying they're trying to break it, bust it, and it's not public release. But yeah, your thoughts about Sora and the reaction to it?
I'm not surprised that they released this. It almost makes sense given what some of the other text-to-video models that were out there. Haven't played with it much, but looks promising. I think we'll expect to see other releases like this from ChatGPT. Oh, sorry, OpenAI.
Yeah, it's had quite an impact on folks, particularly that follow filmmaking. I think some of the discussions on Reddit are things like, is filmmaking over? Is Hollywood dead? Sort of AI fear-mongering like that. But it's quite remarkable from a lot of different perspectives. One being it having sort of the ability to render high-definition video at different resolutions. So it can, if you want 4K or regular HD, it's totally fine. It's interesting from a technical perspective as well, from the idea of having a diffusion-based model combined with a transformer architecture. That's really fascinating. And then they tell a really nice story about the analog between tokens from text, but also what they call patches, kind of spatial visual patches that form the foundation of the transformation that they do in the encoding and then decoding steps. So it's really fascinating technology. They also talk about it in a more general sense, that it's actually a kind of simulator of reality. And so it tends, folks have been saying that it appears as if it learns in sort of air quotes, certain aspects of natural physics, and without having been explicitly trained on those and on those natural physics behaviors. But the end of the technical report does show some curious behaviors with a glass sort of flipping itself on a table and whatnot, which I think is quite amusing. But yeah, it looks super exciting, and I would actually love to build some short films using this model. I think it's super
absolutely.
promising.
You could foresee that if you had a 1 minute max length with a lot of pre-prompt engineering, and then change the bottom half of your prompt every time, you could, in theory, do a long format something. In theory, quite easily? Question mark.
Maybe we'll just stream this whole podcast into Sora and see what we get.
Absolutely. Sadly, I don't think. Well, we're not going to get us though. We're going to get people-ish.
Oh no, I don't.
And
We
I
don't
must say,
even know
our
what we're
knees
getting.
may not work properly, but I think that's one of the defining feedback items. Two bits of feedback, one serious and one, I guess, less serious. One is that perhaps it has been trained on game engines because the examples shown so far align really well with stuff in game engine-ish kind of world, and that could be excellent fodder for, a input of the training data set could be the output of a game engine, and, infinite resolution, infinite, it'll never get bored, versus mining the dirty, grainy, noisy, blurry world of YouTube, that kind of thing. So that's a possible, but the most, I think, cutting example of people talking about how text to video was 12 months ago with the infamous Will Smith eating spaghetti example, which was hallucinating without fail and really quite scary, how far we've come in 12 months. And then to go full circle, Will Smith released a brand new video of him reacting to that, eating spaghetti, trying to be his hallucinogenic self from a year ago. So we've gone full circle, but by all means, people are hanging to use Sora, and without fail, you're right, there's going to be open source fast follows because of the fact that now people know it's possible, but how? So the biggest open question, and I use the word open correctly, I wonder what else OpenAI has in its war chest of its
That's what I'm wondering.
It's pretty amazing if they're doing this and just casually, it's almost, say, at Apple-like, they're releasing it early, loudly, on the basis that probably no one can copy them for a while. They're not releasing it and with a checkbook and put your credit card in here today. They're so far ahead of the release that they're reasonably confident that they've got the edge. Apparently they do. So pretty awesome.
Totally.
Okay, we'll call that pre-Fast 5 Amble. But hey, let's go into Fast 5.
Fast 5.
Okay, welcome back. Quick 10-second break. Fast 5 gives us a chance to organise ourselves. Violet, your Fast 5 of the week is pretty awesome. Love the link. Can you explain what you're going to be putting forward to the team?
Yeah, so I'm sharing SoundxVision. It's a ring for XR. And so I'm going to read you how they describe it. The SoundxVision is a project that delivers XR hardwares and interfaces, turning micro gestures into meaningful inputs for extended reality. So really what that is they've developed a ring that allows you to interact with content on a computer, almost like you would a mouse. So, we're starting to see more of these interactions. Like, of course, Apple's been really doubling down on the finger tapping gestures where people can, wearing an Apple Watch, can tap their fingers together and that does things in their devices. They're also, Apple's really looking at hand tracking with their Vision Pro. Sounds like Meta has been working on some sort of bracelet or wristband of sorts. So I think we're going to continue to see more type of wearables that are just thinking about the tapping, touching, haptics, and motion. And so I thought this was interesting because the ring looks like it allows you to pick up really minute gestures on the hand. So we see someone scrolling through buttons and controlling like something like a volume control by just motioning their thumb over their index finger left and right very subtly. So it feels like a very natural interaction, and it feels also like a very non-invasive piece of tech. I'd be much more happy to put a ring on my finger than a Vision Pro on my face. So I think we're bound to see a lot of hand interactions with this whole emerging field.
Ways to actually bring more positivity, and I mean that in the physical sense, so a positive way to not just feel, but a more active input method. This is this inert? Is this batteryless? Is this using the ring as simply a easier to track, or does this have slight battery, slight gyro, slight orientation sensor and capacitance? Interesting to see whether this is in that active mode or a passive mode. From the videos, it is something that looks perfect. The controls, the gestures that people are doing with the ring feels about right, looks about right. But then the question is whether the ring is adding to that in a Bluetooth active, recharge every 4 hours sense, or whether it simply is being the thing that your device grabs hold of as a positive reinforcement, a positive input.
Yeah. Maybe we can get him on the podcast. We can ask him directly.
Absolutely. Top call. Cheers to that, Violet. All good. So we're going from controllers to hands only, but there are competing interests of how much hardware you need to get intent across. I guess there's going to be a minimum threshold there somewhere, and the first people to solve that and become the standard. I am, of course, thinking of the infamous XKCD comic of, the 3 panels of, oh my God, there are 37 standards for this field. I know, I will make one standard to rule them all. Third panel is there are now 38 standards for this field. So we will watch and wait. Yeah, very cool. William, over to you for a link that goes pretty big, general world models. Do tell.
Yeah, that's right. And it's actually fortuitously related to the Sora announcement from last week. And this one's from Runway Research. It's an article from December, actually, on introducing general world models. And the idea is in the context of generating videos, that the idea is that the models that we can create for such kind of text-to-video experience are actually based off of not strictly the idea of pixels that evolve over time, but actually we can simulate parts of the real world. And that idea of simulation carries over to the Sora announcement as well, where they claim that actually what's happening is something far more profound than, say, being able to predict the next patch of pixels from the previous. And actually what's being modeled are a kind of sense of what's happening predictively in the real world. And there's certainly evolving neuroscience theories around this as well, where neuroscientists are starting to challenge the idea that we have layered brains with a lizard brain sort of sitting in at the lowest level, but actually we actually behave much more like machine learning entities in some respects, where we have a model of the world that we update constantly through our experience and our reasoning and our sensing. And so to have a kind of machine learning model that actually does that, I think is really exciting and profound. I would be curious to see if the capabilities of this extend beyond generating videos, if we could actually have decision making and prediction that come along with this that go beyond just the kind of entertainment aspects of text to video. So
without fail. And this is can we probably say this is going to be the acronym / tag for, dare I say it, the final type of model? We've gone from small models that aren't called large to large language models. Then we're going into multimodal, where image input or data input or image output or data output. I've been asking a few things about spatial graphs recently, and some of the multimodal models are holding up quite well. But the third tier, we have been calling it spatially aware models. Makes sense to us. That is that actual, not just depth because it's got it, but it actually understands and comprehends the space that it's in. But yes, this new phrase is certainly one that's been started to be touted, and we'll see if it takes hold. But general world models, GWM, acronym is okay. It's okay. It's not taken by too many other things, so that's always a starting point. But yeah, I like the fact that you use the word profound. It is going beyond a simplistic, can I grow an image, which was rocket science, but now it's, can I understand what I'm being asked for, and can I replicate it, and can I spin it on its axes? That requires all those things that we talk about to be in the mix, and that is definitely one of the aims that we're trying to work towards. Violet, you're itching to say.
No, I don't know why I was getting close to the microphone.
Oh, good. All good. Do you think GWM, General World Models, is going to be the label of choice for a fully 3D enabled large anything model? Or are we still looking for more labels and better names and better ownership of this space?
I think it's going to need something more catchy. General world models. I was trying to say something in my head like GWM. No, it doesn't work.
No. It doesn't roll off the tongue. It's
you
unique.
You need something.
I'll give it points for unique, but it's not catchy. No. It's like general pants. It's like, yeah, I don't really... Yeah.
But I think for the Rabbit R1, they have the large action model that they're running with, which
okay. That's
is a little bit catchier. But I think it really is a kind of term around what a lot of language models can do already, which is call functions outside of themselves. But so I'm not quite sure if it's as profound as a general world model. But it has the advantage of being marketable.
Mm-hmm.
It does indeed.
I've heard folks use the term physical AI as well for AI that uses large behavior model was another one I heard from the same group calling. Yeah, I think all these terms are so technical that they won't stick. It's like
they're not wrong. They're correct, but they're not exciting.
Yeah,
they're not catchy.
It's the same way that we're all saying AI now to just label everything. It's so easy. Oh, AI. That's AI.
Charged, Your Honour. Yes, indeed. I am culprit number one. I hear you. Well, my Fast Five takes those concepts and puts them into, a refresh. Actually, this is actually going in the realm of Meta. This is Project Aria, which is being re-released. Now, this is pretty rare. Normally, anything new gets a new tag, not an update tag. Let me explain. Project Aria is Meta putting forward to the research world gigs, terabytes, anyway, lots and lots of data of people doing regular things while wearing Meta Vision glasses, or probably even more, where their movements are tagged, their video is tagged, sound is tagged while they're making movements. These are pretty regular activities of doing normal household cooking, playing games, walking around the house, those sorts of things. The re-release, and the reason why it's on the topic today, is that they've actually done more annotation as well as released more scenarios. What they're not touting it as this phrase, but the moment I say this phrase, I'll have to, take out the knife from my back. Other people are saying this is the training set to make Jarvis. Understand, bit of an eye roll, but this is the kind of data set that, by all means, is excellent fodder for so many scenarios. This is multiple people walking around rooms, interacting in quote-unquote absolutely normal behavior. But their movements, their vision, their sound, their actions, their hand tracking and object recognition all happening on the video, but then photogrammetry, sparse point clouds being made on the fly so that their movements, their positions in space are also being tracked. So from the point of an outside observer or a training model, you can be using, how do I go to the fridge? How do I make the omelette? How do I, go from one room to the next? All absolutely fundamental building blocks. But what it's doing, and topic of the day, which is what we're leading to, is this is a model that is absolutely human-focused. It is totally me-centric, to the point that they're actually saying it's egocentric, an updated egocentric data set. So it is absolutely from the point of view of a person, and the training set is absolutely will be particular to any one person. So I think the two subjects in question in the videos, link in the show notes, is great. But hey, if I'm tall and have to duck under all my ceiling fans in my house, that's kind of a training set that needs to be put into place too. So it is already getting localized to the test subjects, but the repository now is growing in size, and the depth and the annotation is certainly also expanded manyfold. So publicly available data set, throw in your email to request it. And I dare say the volume of data is probably going to be probably now overloading. Now the question is, what can we do with this data, and how can we make this into the next batch of understandings for either a future person wearing a headset or a lightweight glasses, but also the training ground. Rather than doing game simulation, we're just using this kind of data set to have every waking moment recorded. And that's where the whole Jarvis kind of end result leads to, although asterisks heavily, not coming to a screen near you likely anytime soon. Any thoughts about this one? Does this strike as part of your potential data sources for some research that you or your colleagues might be able to use?
Potentially. I'm certainly going to refer it to my students so that they can at least see some of the ways that these data are being collected. From an architectural design perspective, architectural and spatial designers have a peculiar role to play of these kinds of things, which is not from the perspective of the agent walking around with the glasses, but actually the decision maker about what those agents see. And so this kind of, and can reason about to some extent. And so such a data set, I think, would be really fascinating to have them poke and prod at. I'm looking at, in particular, at the kind of ARIA digital twin data set, which is this kind of real world, hyper accurate digital counterpart that they call a kind of ground truth annotative environment. So something like this, I think, is exactly what we're looking for in terms of something that's consistent. Spatial data has this challenge that it's hard to find really large data sets that are consistent in structure and that have a lot of accuracy and tagging in a consistent and thorough way, particularly to reason about our complex environments. If we all lived in more of like a Tadao Ando space where we have got pure geometries and just wood and water and concrete to worry about, that would be a much different world. But our homes and offices are full of trinkets and objects and complexities and stairs and all sorts of things that make it really hard to be consistent about. So this is super exciting from that perspective. Can we actually, and then the accessibility of these to folks that are not just machine learning and AI experts. I think that's also a powerful idea as well. So if we can have sort of models deployed on Hugging Face or some other platform where we can start to experiment and tinker with these things without being PhDs, I think that would be amazing. So.
Yes. My reaction to this was actually more just the gut reaction to Meta and in a model that understands so much about one person, which I'm sure is going to be like the whole conversation around glasses or Meta and Facebook just don't have the best track record sometimes with society. So the moment you have a pair of glasses that know your home, know your space, know what you posted on Instagram that you just broke up with your boyfriend. Like, does that start to change the interactions you have? Maybe not, but maybe I'm more. I'm definitely on the cynical side of a lot of these big companies.
Well, good. It's good to be cautious. By all means, this data set is interesting and it certainly is wild. Question though, with that notice to both of you, does a data set like this solve a problem that you've been waiting to solve in the research world? Or does a data set like this open up new questions for which you then figure out whether they can be solved? Cart before the horse. Are there known problems that you've got hanging on a shelf somewhere that when this data set comes along, you go, beauty, I can finally do the thing I've been waiting for? Or is it more, this data set leads questions that then you can extend upon? Does it breed new questions to then put on the wall and try and answer?
I think from my perspective, it's more of the latter, mostly because I'm facilitating a course and environment where I can expose these sorts of ideas to a field of designers who normally don't interact with technology at this level. Spatial designers from the architecture and construction and engineering industries are more about modeling a digital twin from a top-down kind of perspective, where they're saying, oh, I really need to create this data set as a piece of documentation that then is going to be transformed into a physical form. But that transformation is somewhat an inaccurate process of having to go through the messy reality of construction. And so there's a lot of work in the spatial AI realm around being able to take those physical manifestations and bring them into the digital world and compare them with what was intended to be built, so that you can track mistakes, track liability, and essentially manage the project to a greater degree. And then there's this hope that in the future you can scan an existing building that wasn't modeled in such a detailed way, that was built with pen and paper essentially, and then turn it into something that's more manageable through a digital form. This, however, in my mind, has the potential, and datasets like it have the potential to change the paradigm a little bit, so that a spatial designer, say an architect or an interior designer, could potentially have a set of tools at their disposal that they can use to reason about space using more of the capabilities that are afforded to us through large language models and transformers, so that we can, say, talk about the experience that we want a potential inhabitant to have. And so now that sort of value propositioning is quite manual. When I was head of product at Floored, the value propositions that we had were both a client is trying to imagine a space and sell it. And so, but instead of spending a good amount of money on outfitting only a portion of that raw space, they could create a digital version of it and email it to their client, and they could see it in a web browser. We extended that to use generative techniques so that you could have an iPad or a laptop and essentially change the layout of those prospective spaces on the fly, and do that as a broker instead of a skilled designer, and still give your client that experience. But still, those methods are really hard to access. But something like this, if treated in the right way and given and models made around it, could actually have a whole different set of generative tools. So I'm thinking of like Adobe Firefly and being able to generate and edit imagery, but going from 2 to 3 dimensions is not a 50% increase in complexity. Right?
Oh yeah,
it's a multiple fold increase in complexity, and have the kind of leverage that graphic designers now have with Adobe Firefly, but hand that to spatial designers is really exciting.
That's interesting. I was thinking about it actually more from the first perspective, which is my experience with working with digital 3D technology is it's always difficult to take things like video and understand them more objectively as an objective 3D model. So like there's this group called the Center for Spatial Research that does a lot of data journalism and mapping. And this other group in London called Forensic Architecture. And they do all this humanitarian journalism where they take video and then look at things like war crimes and try and figure out from the video, where did it happen? They actually reconstruct 3D models based on the video to see where was the bomb dropped. So they can, someone's manually doing all that work. They're actually working more forensically. So seeing something like this is really interesting because it does solve a specific problem, which is that having tons of crowdsourced subjective views in perspective that are muddy and they're like from all different angles, and then being able to reproduce an objective model that's a 3D model that knows exactly where that perspective was taken from. I'm just like seeing how that solves things in forensics, but probably a lot of other fields too. It's something we've been thinking a lot about, of like, how do we do the same type of object tracking and stuff from? random perspectives. So, yeah, really interesting.
There was an old Microsoft technology, I don't know if it's still around or not. It was probably 10 years ago, of using all the, not Instagram, before Instagram. What was the, I'm going to get it wrong, the image library of choice on the web before. Anyway, they would use all the tourist photos of like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And then you could, like Google Street View, kind of walk towards the Leaning Tower of Pisa by jumping to the next photo that someone took. Maybe the same year, maybe years ago, photosynth or something like that from memory. But look, that was 2D still frames in a 3D space, which was phenomenal technology. Now we're talking with this kind of data set, correlating and putting together multiple 3D long big data sets, long format video, photogrammetry into one coherent picture. It's pretty awesome that they've got two. I'd like to know whether there's only ever two people in scenes or only ever one, or whether they've been able to put that up to 10 or 20, because by all means, the more views, the more insights can be gained.
This is making me think we're going to have a future Google Street View type of thing merged with YouTube. It's just like a real-time digital twin of like whoever's taking video. It's like live updating what's actually happening in the world.
Yep. Google Street View plus nerfs or gasps, and if you want to go interspersed into halfway between the two photos, then you're just there. It's coming.
What year do we think that's coming? Is that like a 2030, 2040?
Probably next year.
Next year, yeah. OpenAI. OpenAI is releasing it next year.
Next Wednesday is the prediction. Top work. We'll leave Fast 5 there. That was Fast 5 combined with some deep insights. But tell you what, let's take a quick break and come back with Deep Dive.
Deep Dive.
Okay, welcome back to Deep Dive. This week's topic is, well, we've got a long version of it and a short version of it. Long version of it is local AI and subjective AI. What's being raised is, how place, local culture, language, country, points of view change the context of an AI. So my take, and I'm going to quickly handball it over to Violet here in a second, is how did this massive world of, I'll stress the words, large language models, global world models, we've got large, huge, massive, awesome, and they can do amazing tricks. We know them, we love them, and we'll use them more and more. But how does it get down to the me level? So my Fast 5 was the egocentric AI training data set. That's pretty important. How do we go from globalizing an AI that, the days of building your own, anything on your own personal water-cooled supercomputer at home is probably not behind us, but definitely not the way to go anymore. Now it's wait and see some of the mega corporations with their years and centuries of training time, what they're going to release next. So how do we go from those big ones down to something that's me-centric? Violet, over to you.
So one thing that I'm really interested in is the idea of having more local, regional models. So it was interesting to see how much something like Google and the internet really changed the world. It became lots of globalizing forces happening at the same time. We Google something and we get a generalized response based on this massive search. It's very global intelligence. There's a potential of AI moving in the same direction, this all-knowing global model that knows about all the different cities, all the different places, all the different contexts and disciplines. It's a structural engineer, but it's also your girlfriend. It's like it's somehow everything. But at the same time, there's another movement that is an interest in how do we put models locally, like actually physically locally on your device? And also, how do we train them to the specific context of your company or maybe even your city? So I'm interested in what would an alternative future look like where we had, instead of one universal, all-knowing model, is there a world in which we have many pluralistic models, almost like regional locals that like know all the things about Philadelphia or know all the things
What is
about
a cheesesteak?
Singapore? Let's get to it knows everything about it.
Yep.
So I'm kind of curious, like, is that a viable future where we have more regional, local knowledge? Is there value to having this pluralistic future? I'm biased. I think that there is, because I think that localness and disciplinary knowledge is actually one of the most valuable experiences. I'm like very interested in that diversity that emerges from local.
That last mile of context is the bit that means I get the right answer with the right spelling, with the right directions, with the right context. Without that, you get the general view of Philadelphia, and I'm now how many 20,000 miles away. I'm using my vague knowledge or historical knowledge. I could have a damn fine guess, like an AI model, but how do you actually, but what's it doing now, and where should I go today? And, all that context is only going to be relevant locally. So what's the downward flow of more bespoke models closer to you? How does that mix with the big one up in the cloud?
Yeah. I'm curious, like, would you value something that was more local? Do you have specific things that, I'm like, I actually just kind of curious, is this even a viable future of having different local models? What does that actually do for you?
I can give you one specific reason why that is probably likely. I need to be a little bit vague in my industry and clientele that I'm playing with. Let's just say we have a new realm of global world weather models that's coming through. A few years ago, they were fine, but you wouldn't use them. In the last 2 years, they've become very good to the point of their ability to predict the weather many days out is in many ways on par, sometimes better, sometimes worse, but it's approaching human level. And when I say human level, what I'm actually comparing to is every nation state's regional supercomputers that are trying to do the exact same job. So the question is, in what year of the future does a global world model for weather probably inform the 90-something% of the numbers that we get given when we check the weather? And how much does a local regional body do minor updates or tweaks if in Philly take off 1.2 degrees? Because reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me wonder what things are more valuable to be more localized. There's so many things that scale just solves so well. So like Google Street View just went everywhere and created a global model that everyone could access. Didn't make sense for a bunch of different companies to tackle that infrastructure. Yeah, so perhaps it's like you're saying, it's like we'll get to something that's global with local tweaks or something.
I think from one perspective as well, at least from a point of even critiquing the current large language models that are on the market, the most obvious one to me is the fact that the largest models today are trained on English. And there are, of course, efforts that are going on, particularly in the research and open source fields. I think Hugging Face has a community-driven project around this as well, to train models off of other languages. And so that first starts to get to the idea of the literature and the knowledge that these cultures have that are beyond the sort of Western affected, like Western sourced cultures. But also there, from a kind of more abstract perspective, the idea that your thinking and the way that you perceive the world is also crafted and influenced by the language that you know and the language that you use. Also sort of affects the reasoning potentially that such language models can exhibit. So I'd be super curious to understand if thinking in East Asian languages and other Western languages differ fundamentally in some way? Do they give you different information, different conclusions, different sorts of reasoning? Like
different life philosophies altogether.
Yeah, for sure. Particularly when considering the kind of lexicon and corpus that would be available from that training. Like just thinking about the 5,000 years of written Chinese history, sort of mind-boggling from that perspective, and the idea that individual Chinese characters can be represented as tokens, and then have their own embeddings and so on and so forth to fit the transformer architecture, and then that. Really changing how we think. And then that also comes with potential downsides, particularly with how at least Western cultures are evolving around diversity and bias and so on and so forth. I think one popular thing to see on TikTok are how the words for men and women are different in languages like Mandarin and Cantonese, where if you're over the age of 30 and you're a male, you have some really sort of positive words that describe you. But if you're over the age of 30 and you're female, then there are many different words for that carry negative connotations in certain East Asian languages, like the orange at the bottom of the bucket, and like things like phrases like that are very strange from our perspective. And so and along with that as well, like the sort of localization of the kind of curious, biased localization of some of the models that we have today is also an interesting aspect. Where if you ask, there was a study done. I was looking for it just now. I'll find the article later, where a kind of consistent study was done around words that refer to people and places, and more positive images are generated, say, if you ask for a New York City street than you ask for a street in India, for example, or in Africa, where just the training data that you get is already biased based on those localities. And so I think what we're talking about is both from a generative and analytical perspective, something where we really have to pay close attention to not only the benefits of that kind of localized nature, but also once you're the other, once you're the observer from outside, how do you treat that? Yeah, how do you treat those localized phenomenon?
Yeah, it seems important to have a lot of these models, regardless if they're general or local, being developed by locals, so that you definitely get a range of perspectives as those are getting developed.
There's been a real series of memes on the interwebs of asking a multimodal for images on the same text input, but then just changing the country. So, a typical morning breakfast routine in America, Australia, XYZ country, and having a nice list of them, or 10 levels of houses from poor to mansions in country XYZ, and then having the series, or actually the matrix of images to sort of show the, of course, inbuilt bias and expectations, what it was trained on, what it thinks. Almost that's one of the classic gotchas that's happened in the last few weeks. I'd say, not few years, of the way to catch out these models, because they're obviously wrong, but attempting to localize them is close. I wouldn't mind asking you a question, and I'm going to go back in history. This is BC. This is before COVID, so it's really old. But before large language models, there was a design pattern. You can tell I'm an architect. I use that phrase like it's a daily everything. I haven't said it in the last 20 minutes, so I'm not getting my goals up. A design pattern of, before we had large models, of using an ensemble. The basic trend, the basic thinking was, have all the models turned on for a topic. One might be a image detection, one might be a giraffe detector, Is this image a chair, a box, a car? And it might say it's a car, but your other model, which your a giraffe detector, says it's not a giraffe. Before we had all encompassing models, we had lots of models potentially stacked up side by side, all fed the same input, and the ones that were the most confident would rise to the top of, I think it's an X, I think it's a Y. All the giraffe detectors would stay remarkably quiet for most of their natural lives. Now we've gone back from that to one model to rule them all. Perhaps in this localization model, we might have the big model in the cloud. We may have a local dispersed by IP, by location, by internet provider, who knows, but a local flavor. And then on your device, it might be able to add the 1%, the 2%, the 3%, the tiebreaker. Is this, here we go, now I'm going to go into uncharted territory, a Philly cheesesteak or just a steak sandwich with melted cheese on it? Did I get that right? I just call it a steak sandwich with a bit of melted cheese on it, But if my local model was able to correct it or tell me what the Aussie version was versus the Philly version was, then, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Perhaps floating a topic of distributed AI that is all ensembling, all adding to the mix, not necessarily competing for the mix. But your local device, low power, but it has, and here we go, have to mention the movie by Spike Jonze, the movie Her, which of course is probably one of the most prescient AI movies in recent 10 years. And we're edging towards it really quickly, where it knows you. Granted, I'm not going to fall in love with my AI just yet, but it knows you. So that's, I guess, the last few percent, isn't it? To amalgamate all that general knowledge into something that is personal, specific. And you can, before it, I won't spoil the movie, flies away.
That was something that William and I have been playing with, is this idea of being able to talk to a city. So we've been working on this, something for Philadelphia. We were joking that it would be called Philip for Philadelphia.
Nice.
And that it could even have a kind of funky personality that's Philly specific. But, there's so much context out in the world, like street signs that carry so much context, like a historic marker or a parking sign. And we have databases of all of that spatial data. So more and more it makes sense to have so more and more it makes sense to have more localized models for that, even kind of like spatial data set context about where you're at when you're asking questions. Perhaps you're asking questions specific to the city.
Well, to the ensemble point, I think there's also a movement or a design pattern, if you will, around AI agents and AI networks. And there's some really promising frameworks like LangChain, AutoGPT, MetaGPT, and so forth that are showing how just sort of well-prompted or even fine-tuned models can coordinate with each other to achieve more complex tasks. I tend to put my bets on that pattern versus the all-in-one, and I like it because it not only makes sense from a kind of being able to compose different capabilities, and those capabilities can be like super specialized. It also democratizes AI to a large extent, where you can combine different open source models. Smaller models can be trained by us if they're sufficiently small. You can spend a couple $100 on fine tuning a model if you have the right data, and so those might even end up being open source sort of products, if you will, that then could be combined into agent chains or agent networks. And that I think there's tremendous risks from a society perspective to have only 1, 2, or 3 companies sort of own AI altogether. So I'm really excited about anything that makes AI more accessible and democratized from that perspective. I'm sort of looking for the free open source or the GNU version of AI coming up.
Dare I say it, we need to think of a marketing phrase for, this is a bad phrase, so here goes the marketers, an AI of AIs. Not one global model to rule them all, but a way to not the model that I was talking about, the design pattern, is that all the models are sitting on the shelf and they all answer individually. But William, your design pattern, here you go, I get paid $10 every time I say the phrase, is these are all internetworked, and so they actually functionally coordinate. Thank you for the design pattern book, very good. Okay, architects unite, yes. Nice. Okay, so can we have that in a PowerPoint, please, William? That'd be great. This is
right.
a window into our world. Okay, so we're calling it first that this is what's coming, hasn't got a good handle, but global models have their place. If we want to know, can you summarize this text for me? Can you build me a thing? The big ones take over because they're awesome. If we want to know US versus Australian isms, then probably there's an Australian g'day model and it, says, yep, it's truth, she'll be right, no worries. No, it knows what no wuckins is. I'll leave that one up to the viewers to figure out. And then there are local ones that are regional. And then violet to the rabbit and other things in our pockets, on our faces, in our hands, there's hopefully a egocentric, a me-centric something that just translates to the way that I understand it. A lot of people, I'm going back to architect stuff. Wow, I really am getting paid a lot to say this phrase. It's different people have different ways of learning. People like me love a diagram. If it can't be done in a diagram, then you got to do it in 20,000 words. But a diagram does everything. So I love a good visual chart. You can see by some of the spatial space side projects. If I'm not sure, I make a chart of it to figure it out. Other people love to read. Other people love to hear. Other people love to, have a brain dump by a trusted friend. But if that last level of an AI is able to understand our ways of learning and do that last level translation, oh my God, I'd buy that tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So is this coming? Can we predict it? Or no, we just have to wait for someone to be the first to the party? But by the sound of it, it needs to be someone with some either a great way of working and open source and everyone jumps on it, or is OpenAI going to release it next week?
Yeah, I had read that there's a rumor that Reddit is selling the user content to Google for training, and at the same time, I think we mentioned before this sort of defensive mechanism called Nightshade that artists can use to post their work online, but sort of contaminate any potential training on a vision model for itself. So extending this idea of democratizing AI one step further, I wonder if there's a future where we actually have agency over how much we participate in the training of these models. And so that would be an even further step where I would say, can we get to that place where you can sort of sign a set of permissions that say like, yeah, you can use what I post on my blog, but you can't use what I post on Instagram or anything family related.
Or there better be micropayments, like just hundredths of a cent that go my way.
Yeah, the sort of the Web3 promise from NFTs. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. If you've ever hosted your own websites and you've read the raw logs of things hitting your websites, the ratio of bots to humans is astounding. The same as in the email world. The ratio of spam that gets caught to actually emails that go through is high 90s to single digits of spam. Sadly, the world of bots on the internet, because you can scrape a website, you can scrape the entire internet if you want, or just follow someone else. Yes, this is all easily done technically, but I wonder if they're going to honour that. But no. The issues of privacy then with how do I get me correct is going to be one of the big stumbling blocks. To go all the way back to the start of our chat today, Sora is fantastic by the looks of it at doing straight text to video, but it does not do and probably will be limited to, you can never ask it to do President Biden saying something. There will be probably the physical limitations and probably technical limitations, probably like other large models. It doesn't know specifics. If you say, I'm going to get in trouble, elderly white man with blue suit, red tie, you can probably do all that perfect, but it won't get it exactly what you want. It'll just be vaguely similar to someone. The amount of prompting to get it perfect will be near impossible, dare I say it. So, yeah, the generalization versus the specificness of you or me is pretty wild. Maybe that's coming to a screen near you. Well, thank you, team. Well done. I definitely feel educated. It's nice chatting to two adjunct professors and not being the professor in the room. It's excellent. Thank you kindly. I think more of the team will join next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about prototyping and getting into spatial AI. What sort of tools, what sort of pathways are possible? So calling all the hackers, not hackers, but the techno crew of of how their pathways have happened, how they fell into it or purposefully fall into it. A lot of resources we'll be putting out, a lot of our personal stories, and we'll chat about how to start and how to quickly jump ahead in the spatial AI world. Dare I say it, learning tools good, but line one, position one, learning code, there are faster ways. We'll start to tackle some of them next week. From all of us here, though, we might leave it there, and we'll catch you next week on Spatial. See you, team.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you'd like more news and insights about spatial AI, or have a story or interesting topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to us. Or better yet, come and join the community at Spatial. All the links are in the show notes.